Haribol, we good? Okay. Let's start from the beginning, all right? This is good stuff. So when Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives fear, reward, duty, love concept, no, we'll do this one to start with. So I don't know that what place you're quoting from. And this happens sometimes is it goes around the temple, like the telephone game, and then you never bother figuring out where it came from. So the first thing you got to do is you got to find out where it came from. Once you find out where it came from, now you got to go back to the Bengali because you're trying to see why it isn't the Sanskrit. But for all you know, it could be the Sanskrit and the translator messed up. And so if you take an idea that's in a particular language, in this case Sanskrit from the Gita, are the 4 reasons why people surrender to Krishna, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur translates it into Bengali, and then somebody translates that Bengali into English, you have 3 levels. The original Sanskrit text of the Gita, the secondary Bengali paraphrasing of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and third, you have the way it's worked its way into English, right? In a translation. I guess you have a 4th way, you don't even know where it came from. So you have like the ISKCON pundits who gave it to you, right? Then you have 4 levels, right? But if you take, and I gave you the example before, if you take the idea of Jesus eating broma, which is all over the Bible, and broma means food, but he never eats crayas. Crayas is meat. And somebody translates like they did in 1611, the King James Bible, and they say Jesus ate meat. That makes a lot of sense in 1611 because meat was synonymous with food. Just like in Bengal, they'll say, let's eat rice. You may not only be eating rice, but rice is a part of every meal, and so it's become synonymous with the word food, right? Now somebody comes along and they want to translate that 17th century Bible into modern English, and they do a big research study, and they figure out, okay, well, Jesus was a shepherd and he lived in Galilee, and so what did shepherds in Galilee eat? And they do some kind of testing of bone fragments, and they do some DNA testing, and they get dental sets of teeth that were buried from that time, and they analyze the wear patterns on the teeth, and they find food fragments, and they do some kind of major analysis, and they figure out that there's an 87% chance that Jesus would have been eating lamb as a shepherd from the different things they found in the dental records in the archaeological dental records they've dug up, right? And they do a whole bunch of work, right? But they have to go back to the Greek, and they find out that Jesus just ate food. It never said he ate meat. And even from very early on, like the Clementine homilies, there were all sorts of ideas that Jesus never ate meat, that his apostles never ate meat, and that the meat eating was not a part of early Christianity. So there's a whole tradition there for that. And so the best thing to do is to go back to the original Greek, and then when you modernize it, say Jesus ate food. Just like in Spanish, you say, I'm between a sword and a wall. A sword and a wall. But in English you say I'm between a rock and a hard place. Means I'm in a situation where whatever I do is going to be bad. You must have something like this in Hindi also, right? What do you say in Hindi? Two situations, either one you do is going to be bad. How do you say it in Hindi?
We have some like that.
Yeah? What does it translate to?
On one side is a well, other side is a
ditch?
Ditch sort.
A what?
Quicksand.
Quicksand. There you go. Perfect.
Quicksand and also
okay,
well.
That's right. So if we want to translate that into English, you shouldn't translate on one side is a well, on the other side is quicksand. You should say I'm between a rock and a hard place. You want to translate to Spanish, you should say I'm between a sword and a wall. You don't always translate literally. Sometimes you have to translate culturally. You follow? So what you've done here is you took this idea from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. You didn't find out where it came from. You didn't get me the original Bengali shlok. Now you're trying to compare it to what's in the Gita. For all we know, he did use the right terms and the translator messed up. For all we know, the translator did the right thing and the Chopati devotees messed up when they started quoting it, and we never bothered looking. But before you try to, you break your head doing all this additional research and meditation on it, the first thing you got to do is you got to get all the details together. And without all those details in front of you, you can't do anything right. It's like if you want to cook, you got to get your pots. They got to be clean. Your kitchen has to be clean. You have to get all your ingredients. They have to be all suchi. You have to get suchi yourself, and then everything laid out, you can make a nice meal very fast. Otherwise, you're spending so much time reaching around your head to touch your nose. You know what I mean? Okay, that's the first question, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we also discussed different ways in which love, from that shloka in the Gita, what was that shloka? Eka bhaktir vishishate, right?
Yeah.
And so that indicates that the jnani has bhakti. And so that even if Bhaktivinoda Thakur did translate it, right, as love instead of jnana, there's really strong support, right?
Yeah.
What is it? It's Tesham jnani nitya yukta, right? Eka bhaktir vishishate. So that jnani, for those jnanis who are always united with me, with this one point of bhakti, they are superior, right? Priyohi jnani naha ati artam aham satcha mama priyaha. That jnani, I am dear to that jnani, and he is dear to me, right? So this translates very easily as love. And so this idea of karma, jnana, bhakti as being three separate margs, you don't get that in the Gita. You don't get that in the Gita. Krishna takes these terms and uses them together. And so you don't get this kind of separation into like karma, yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. Krishna sort of collapses those things. And the bhakti yogi is a jnani. You follow? And he's doing karma out of love for Krishna. Actually, you even find this in Anya Abhilasita Shunyam. Jnana karmadi anavritam. So it's Anya Abhilasita Shunyam, no other desire. But then jnana karmadi anavrit. Not covered by jnana and karma. There's a reason why he says not covered by jnana and karma, because there's no possibility of doing bhakti without some jnana that you know that Krishna is lovable and that you're Lord, and there's no possibility of doing bhakti without some karma, doing something to show your love for Krishna. And so karma and jnana as action and knowledge are intrinsic to anything in this world. You follow? Now the Bhagavatam has that in the 11th canto. You have these three paths for the person. It's in the 11th canto in the 20th chapter. And so you have for these people who are attached to fruits, they do karma. People who like are super detached from the world, they do jnana. And people who are neither attached nor detached, but jata shradho mat katashu, they have some attachment. They've awakened some faith in Krishna's narrations. For them, they do bhakti. So that tree marg, tree yoga is there in Bhagavat, but it's not there in the Gita. It's not there. Actually, Krishna has a very streamlined system. You find beautiful verses like in the 4th chapter that really show this. Here. Text 23. Gata sangasya muktasya. So, for the mukti whose attachment is gone. Jnana avastita chetasaha. He's situated in jnana. His consciousness is situated in jnana, right? Yagyaya acharta karma. He's doing work for yagya, right? Samagram praviliyate. Everything merges together. So you've got yagya, karma, and jnana all in the same verse. Isn't it? In the verse I just quoted you have jnana and bhakti in the same verse, right? The jnani who's as eka bhakti, right? And so you've got, you see in the Gita like a much more, what do I want to say, harmonious presentation. And actually in this whole thing of those 4 paths, jnana, karma, bhakti, and yoga, you know where that comes from? Vivekananda in 1890 in a book he wrote called Raja Yoga. It's not even traditional. The word Raja Yoga is a retronym. It's a way of referring to something from the past. It only came about in the 13th, 14th century. And so Raja Yoga was used by the Hatha yogis to contrast Hatha yoga, forceful yoga, with Raja yoga, the king's yoga, the yoga that took a long time and was meant for kings, versus Hatha yoga, the yoga you can use now to achieve perfection very quickly. And it was used in a negative way. They would say that Hatha yoga is better than Raja yoga, that Raja yoga gives results only after a long time, but Hatha yoga forces the results quickly. Hatha means forceful, severe. And so even that term, Raja yoga, is a modern term to use to refer to yoga. You follow? It's a modern term. To use to refer to Patanjala yoga, it's a modern term. And then, like around the 15th, 16th century with the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is one of these texts on Hatha Yoga, very important text on Hatha Yoga, one of the Mula Shastras. And then they say, no, Hatha is Raja, Hatha leads to Raja, by Hatha Raja is made possible, by Raja Hatha is made perfect. But what they're trying to do there is make everybody happy. But originally the earliest sources had negative things to say. So this, we just hear that, like the 4 yogas, and we start teaching, we never question where it comes from, right? We never question whether it's true or not, right? And then Krishna does set up a hierarchy, right? I referred to it in class on Sunday, right? Karmi bhyas chadiko yogi, jnani bhyo pimatodika, tapasvi pyodiko yogi, tasmat yogi bhavarjuna. So one yogi is better than the karmis, the jnanis, the tapasvis, right? And then yogi namapi sarve shaman, of yogis, shradhavan bhajate yomam, same yukta tamo mata. He's considered to be the most yukta, the most yogad. That person who's shradhavan, with faith, bhajate yomam. He worships me, right? And so, when there is a hierarchy set up, Bhakti is clearly situated at the top. There's no different temperaments, different personalities. That's not there in the Gita at all. If it is ever divided, you follow? If it is ever divided, then and you have a hard. You could say, well, that karma is not karma yoga. Of course, Krishna never recommends anything but yoga in the Gita. So for him to say one yogi is better than the karmis, where did Krishna teach just regular karma? Nowhere in the Gita. So when he makes that comparison at the end of the 6th chapter, you kind of get the feeling he's talking about karma yoga, jnana yoga, and tapasya yoga, because he's referred to all those things throughout the text. He's never referred to tapasya separate from yoga, jnana separate from yoga, karma separate from yoga. You follow? That was never done in the Gita. So it'd be very unusual if he was to throw in these things he'd never dealt with. However, those things as different types of yoga have been dealt with in the Gita, but they're always ultimately leading to bhakti. That's one of the nice things about the Gita. You have from the 2nd chapter, yukta asita matpara. You yoga yourself, matpara, with me as your goal, right? And then in the 3rd chapter, you have that matsanyasya, sarva karmani matsanyasya adhyatma cetasa, right? So you're surrendering everything to me. And that's actually really nice, because sannyas we normally translate as throwing something down or renouncing something. But sam, ni, right? Us. It really communicates the idea of placing something in the proper place. Very similar to pranidhan. Very similar to pranidhan, right? The language is almost exactly the same. Pra for sun, and then ni is the same, and then us and dha, right? It really communicates of placing something where it belongs. So you find Krishna actually giving that definition of sannyas, right? Mat sannyasya adhyatma cetasa, right? And so you have this idea that you're surrendering everything, you're placing everything back to Krishna where it belongs. Then the 4th chapter, of course, you have Jama karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvata, right? In the 5th chapter, Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarva loka maheshwaram. In the 6th chapter, yogi namapi sarvesham, and that beautiful verse about I've never lost to him and he's never lost to me, right? In the 6th chapter. In the 7th chapter, right, you have this what is the verse you wanted to discuss? It's 7:14. It's Daivihi Yeshu Gunamai, right? Mameva ye prapadyante mayame tam tarantite. So you have in all the chapters of the Gita, right? Ananyas Chintayatomam and Ananya Chetasa. What is that? Sulabha. What is it? 8th chapter. Tasyaham Sulabha Partam, right? That's right. And in the 9th chapter, Satatam Kirtayanto Mam, right? And then in the Mammanabhava Mabhakto, and of course you have the Chatushloki in the 10th chapter. And in the 11th chapter, you have that beautiful verse, 54. Yeah, no, I was thinking of 54. That's also there, but no, 54 is Mat Karma Krit Mat Parama. Yeah. Mad Bhakta Sangavarjita, right? That's beautiful. Yeah, it goes together. Bhaktya Ananya Shakya. Yeah, those two, right? And then the 12th chapter, you have that kind of ladder, the sliding scale with the pure bhakti at the top of it, right? That's interesting because Tesham Aham Samudharta is really beautiful here. So it says here now, for I become the deliverer, right? The savior. But for who? Ananyeva yogena mam jayanta upasate mayi sanyasya matpara. So you have here this beautiful idea of grace, right? Of Krishna reaching down to lift us up, samudharta, mixed with a full commitment from the devotee. You see that? Right? Then the 13th chapter, you have a couple of verses in the 13th chapter that are really sweet. Oh yeah, here we go. Mad bhakta etad vigyaya mad bhava yo papadyate. Right? You also have that thing about when he describes knowledge in the right? You have there, he has Mayit Shanya, Mayitcha Ananya Yogina Bhaktir Abhyabhicharini, right? So you have that as well. 2 places there. And then the 14th chapter, see, the reason the 14th chapter is more important actually because in the 13th chapter, Krishna lays out these ideas of Chaitra, Chaitragya, Prakriti, Purusha, and what are the other 2? Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti, Purusha, Chaitra, Chaitragya, Jnanam and Gyayam. That's interesting because Chaitra and Chaitragya are a microcosm. Your body and you are a microcosm. The larger category is Prakriti and Purusha. You are an instance of Prakriti and Purusha.
I have a question. Where does this 13.1 come from? Some editions do not have this verse, no?
No, some editions don't have it.
Yeah.
Some editions just start with Krishna describing
it. It makes sense actually not having that.
It's not required.
It's not required. Why would Arjuna ask after 12th chapter, discussing bhakti and everything, clarify? Suddenly 13th chapter is like, doesn't make sense to me.
Well, several things is this. Is that like the 8th chapter, these things are brought up. They're brought up in the 7th chapter, but they're dealt with in the 8th chapter. You've got Adi Yagya, Adi Daiva, Adi Bhuta. What is it else? Adi Daiva, Adi Yagya, Adi Daiva, Adi Yagya, Adi Bhuta. What else is there? There's 6 of them. What else? Adhyatma, that's 4. There's 2 more. What's the last 2? Akshar, Daivam. Brahma and Daivam, right? Yeah. Adi Daivam. There you go. So Adi Daiva, Adi Bhuta, Adi Yagya, Adhyatma, right? Brahman, right? And what was the last one?
How at the end of the life?
Oh, that's right. No, that's a question. That's a follow. There's 6 items. Then that's a follow-up question. There's 6 items. Karma. There you go. So, Adhyatma, Adi Yagya, and Adi Daiva, those are all in the Upanishads. Those are in the Upanishads. Kavim Purana Manushashitaram, that's a joining of 2 verses from the Upanishads together. That whole thing about when you leave your body, that's also from the Upanishads. Chanting pranav and all that, that also is direct quotation from the Upanishads. The Ashwata tree in the 15th chapter, that's from the Upanishads as well. And so this Chaitragya, those terms occur in the Upanishads. So Krishna is reviewing terms that were explored in the Upanishads and giving his tika on them. You follow? He's clarifying their meaning. You follow? He's developing these concepts. So the concepts were there. Krishna's not speaking in a vacuum. Hindu society, Vedic society was already fully existing at the time Krishna spoke the Gita. So he's cleaning up and clarifying and giving some further notes. And it's really, in many ways, you're going from tat, that, to mam, right? You follow? You're going from an aham. You're going from in
a way, this is also Upanishad only, Gita Upanishad.
But what I'm saying is an important point. The Upanishad, mainly you're dealing with Brahman as being Tat Brahman. But in the Gita, it becomes a person. Mam, aham. You follow? And so there's an evolution to a personal conception of God, where Krishna becomes the cynosure of all existence that everybody should surrender to. And so instead of Brahman being an ineffable, undefinable reality, with some things being said about it, some points being made about it, but not enough to really make a solid argument, in the Gita it's full-fledged theism. You follow? So there's an evolution. Now, of course, because Krishna is the author of Veda, then he also gets to clarify what he meant. If I write a book and then tell you what I meant after you get confused about it, that doesn't mean I'm giving a new meaning. It just means I'm clarifying the original meaning that you had lost. So in the 13th chapter, Krishna is doing very similar things to what he did in the 8th chapter. He's exploring these terms and bringing them into kind of a discussion about himself. You follow? And the idea of gunas gets brought up. In the discussion on Prakriti, the idea of the gunas gets brought up. And then the 14th chapter discusses the gunas. And so the 13th and 14th chapter, they flow together like that. And so therefore when he says, Mam chayo vyabhicharana, he's really giving a tika on the process for the entire 13th and 14th chapter. You got it, right? Yeah. And why is it that by vyabhicharani bhakti yoga, right? Sagunan samatitaitan, you transcend the gunas. Why is it? And Brahma Bhuya Kalpa, you become fit for becoming Brahman, right? Why is it? Because Brahmano hi pratishtaham, because I am the foundation of Brahman. So the reason why bhakti to Krishna makes you Brahman is because Krishna himself is the foundation of Brahman, and therefore he can give you that existence as being spiritual. Does that make sense? You see the point? That Brahmano hi pratishtaham is directly related to Mam chayo vyabhicharana bhakti yoga and sevate. So then, now you become Brahman. So now you have bhakti as sadhana, right? Right? But then Brahmabhuta prasanatma. Now you are Brahmabhut, right? Previously you Brahma Bhuya Kalpate. Sadhana of bhakti got you Brahman. You follow? Now Brahmabhuta prasanatma. Now you are Brahman, right? Na sochati na kankshti samasarveshu bhuteshu. You're equal to everybody, you don't hanker or lament. And then mad bhakti lavate param. Now there's a sadhya bhakti. You follow? You have in the Gita a sadhana of bhakti to lead you to a sadhya bhakti. Mad bhakti lavate param. Right? A superior bhakti, a higher bhakti. You follow? Nice, right?
Yeah.
And of course the amazing thing is that Brahmabhuta prasanatma is rejected by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Jnana Mishra Bhakti. Eho Bahya, right? Oge Kahar, right? That's how he responds to Ramanand Roy, isn't it? And so you have in the Gita this bhakti as a sadhana and a sadhya, but then Gaudiya Vaishnava takes it even further in the Ramananda Samvad. It goes even further, it goes beyond that. Several of those verses of the Gita are rejected as being external. Yat Kuroshi Das Nasi. Krishna somehow or other manages to avoid Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakta. You know, he doesn't. That's not quoted by Ramananda Roy. But Brahmabhuta Prasanama is, along with Yat Kuroshi Dashnasi, rejected as being external to take deeper to the Bhagavatam. Okay, so 13.1, you can reject it, but if it's in there, as it is with some editions, then there's no problem. Because what is he really doing? He's just setting up the question like he does in the 8th chapter. So if you can accept it in the 8th chapter, which is always there in every version, what's the problem with it being in the 13th chapter? And some Gitas have 700, 704, 703 verses. It's just not that big of a deal. If you really want to find out whether we should accept it or not, what you do is you go back to our acharyas. And you see a Vishwanath Chakravarti, Baladev Vidyabhushan, if they were working with it, right? And so Madhusudan Saraswati, you find out if it was there 400 or 500 years ago. That would give you an indication, right? But if we do accept it, what's the problem? He's just setting up the same way he did in the 8th chapter. Therefore, it's not a big deal. It shouldn't agitate you, it shouldn't bother you, it's not a big deal.
8th chapter still has a reference to the previous chapter. Krishna ended the 7th chapter with those terms. And that's why he asked in the 8th beginning.
So he could either end with the 7th and then begin. Oh yes, he ended with them, and then therefore Arjuna asked him. Yes, in the 13th chapter it comes out of nowhere, right?
Out of nowhere.
Sure. But so you could say Arjuna's been hearing these things for so many years. Adhyatma, Adidaiva, Chechagya. Those terms also occur in the Upanishads, and so then he's heard them so many times. So he's finally like, hey Krishna, give me some Siddhant. Like I have these things all swimming around in my head, the same way we sit together.
But I am wondering, he has been hearing all this. He knows the difference between body and soul. In 2nd chapter, Krishna is telling as if Arjuna doesn't know the difference between body and soul.
No. But here's the thing. Is that first of all, Arjuna is Devadatta. He's the everyman. In Sanskrit plays, if they have somebody who's supposed to represent you, he's called Devadatta. And so in English theater, it's called the everyman. Means I watch you going through what you're going through, and I relate to you. And therefore, the lesson you learn becomes my lesson.
What is spelling E-V-E-R-Y, everyman?
Everyman. The everyman. You follow? And that the same thing is there in Sanskrit drama. It's called, and his name is always Devadatta. Devadatta. But you watch him. If you're Sahridoy, Rupa Goswami uses this term, Sarvador. If you have a soft heart, right? A compassionate heart, right? Then when you watch drama, you relate to the hero of the drama. And then when he experiences pleasure or pain, you experience it also. Like Prabhupada said when he was at Advaitacharya in the play, they looked out and everybody was crying. Right? Because Bengalis are very soft-hearted by nature, and the play was really good, so everybody got immersed. It's like when you watch your football team play, or your cricket team play, and you cry when they lose, or you're happy when they win, right? It's the same kind of thing. And so Arjuna, by being an illusionist, is representing that for us. However, Arjuna has so many confusions. Why in the 3rd chapter? By the time you get to the 3rd chapter of the Gita, why is he still asking that question again? Tadekam vad. Krishna was very clear. Right? He wasn't telling him one of two things. He was telling him to fight, but be detached. He made his argument perfectly. How to be in this world, but not of this world. To do your duty, but be unattached. Right? And that's samadvam yoga uchate and yoga karmasu koshalam. Right? He made it very clear what he wanted. He wanted Arjuna to fight, and he wanted to be detached. So why is Arjuna asking in the 3rd, like first you're telling me not to do it, then you're telling me to do it. Why is he asking him that? So Krishna can now expand the concept of Buddhi Yoga, as it's been given. Buddhi in Buddhi Yoga is the Sankhya. Eshate bihita Sankhya Buddhi Yoga Tatshranu. So the Sankhya is you're not the body. Then Yoga is when you take that idea that I'm not the body and you live your life. So he's already put together theory and practice perfectly. The theory of Sankhya leads to the practice of Yoga. The philosophy of Sankhya informs the practice of Yoga. Buddhi Yoga, the Buddhi and the Yoga. Yoga is active, Buddhi is theoretical. Sankhya and Yoga have been put together perfectly. Jnana and Karma have been put together perfectly. You follow? They've already been done in the 2nd chapter. What's the problem? So why is he again asking it? Because then Krishna gets to link Sankhya Yoga, what is it? Sankhya Yogena Yogina, Sankhya Yogena Jnaninam, what is it? Jnana Yogena Sankhyanam. The Jnana Yoga of the Sankhya's. Karma Yoga and Yoginam, the Karma Yoga of the Yogis. Now the term Yoga and Karma and Jnana has been linked to the term Sankhya and Yoga. You follow? So now Karma and Yoga go together, right?
It's confusing how Sankhya Yoga this little fast.
It's too fast for you?
Yeah.
All right, we'll do it again. We'll do it again.
No, it's okay.
No, we'll do it again. No.
A similar question.
No, hold on. This is important. You'll like this. Sankhya in the 2nd chapter is you are not this body.
Yeah.
That Sankhya becomes Yoga because Eshate Bihista Sankhye Buddhi Yoga Tatshrinu. That Yoga is Karma Sukaushalam. It's the art of work. Right? Yoga sta kuru karmani. Do your karma, right? So here we go. You are not the body. What does Krishna call that?
Sankhya.
He calls it Sankhya. That's not Sankhya. It's a very modified form of Sankhya. Sankhya is the backbone of all Indian philosophy because it's distinguishing between spirit and matter. You follow? Any theistic system has to explain that there's something more than matter. So Sankhya is the essence of beginning spirituality. That you are not this body. You follow? If you think you're this body, you're an atheist. So every spiritual tradition has some version of Sankhya where they separate you from your body, right? Now, whether you divide things into 36 categories like the Shaiva Siddhantis, or 26 categories like the theistic Sankhyites, or 25 categories like the atheistic Sankhyites, or 2 categories like Krishna does, it doesn't really make any difference. Sankhya is spirit and matter, right? Then, once you have that knowledge, you then have to go and live your life. And what's that called?
Yoga.
That's called yoga. There you go. You follow? Now Arjuna says, which one do you want me to do? Like a fool, because after you read the 2nd chapter, especially with Prabhupada's Tika, this question doesn't exist anymore. You know what Krishna wants you. He wants you to fight and be detached, right? Karmani eva dikaraste, mapaleshi, right? It's like very clear. Beginning teaching of the Gita, isn't it? So now, in the 3rd chapter, he asks this question, and Krishna gets to explain Jnana Yogena Sankhyanam. Now, Jnana Yoga is the same as Sankhya. Did you follow that? Karma Yogena Yoginam. Now, Karma Yoga is the same as Yoga. You follow? That's important because those terms, Jnana and Karma, are very important to people who follow Veda. Right? Right? Just listen with me. Do you want to read along while I'm saying this? Just listen. So now we have Sankhya and Jnana together. We have Karma and Yoga together. Theory, practice. Philosophy, consequence of the philosophy. Right? Work, knowledge which informs that work. They go together. Isn't it? Passive, active. Right? Theoretical, practical. Jnana, vijnana. It perfectly goes together, right? So now, those terms come up again. Now, because the third chapter, Arjuna asks that question, Krishna gets to evolve karma yoga into yajna. Not that you just do your duty and are detached. Now you give something back. You follow? That's yajna. And so now the concept of karma yoga evolves into yajna. You follow? And then those terms all merge together in the fourth chapter, right before that Brahmarpanam. Why? And I showed you that verse, right? Because yajna, karma, jnana, they all get merged together. Because that's what Krishna's teaching. He's teaching a holistic system, right? Then in the fifth chapter it comes up again. Isn't it? There's two questions Arjuna has in the fifth chapter again, right?
We had a long discussion on
right? Remember that?
Yeah.
And there he's asking about yoga and sannyas, right? Sannyas goes with jnana and sankhya. Yoga, right, goes with karma and yajna, right? Then he asks again in the 18th chapter about tyag and sannyas, right? And again, tyag goes with karma and yoga, and sannyas goes with sannyas and jnana and sankhya. And it's the basic principle of, do you renounce this world or do you remain active in this world? And so in the Mahabharata, the sankhyas and the yogis, they're always fighting. They're always arguing. You follow? And so what's Krishna doing? He's laying this issue to rest once and for all. He's dealing with all these guys, right? And then you finally get it. It's like you're never supposed to give up, right? Right? You're always supposed to do your duty, right? And he starts the sixth chapter like that also. The real sannyasi isn't the one who lights no fire, does no duty, right? And then he messes the whole thing up because he says, yoga arurukshu karma karanam, yoga arudha shama karanam. Now he introduces the idea that you can actually renounce things. And there's a bunch of ways you could try to resolve it, but if you look at the sadhana given in the sixth chapter, he's recommending a renunciation. So that's shama, right? It really does mean that there is a certain point, and that then these ideas of like that the atmarati has no duty to perform, right? Those have some meaning now, because there is actually a possibility that there might be somebody who can renounce this world, that has that adhikar, where that is normal for them. So you have to get to the top floor. You may start on the 6th floor, the 5th floor, the 4th floor. You may take an elevator or take the stairs, but you're all going to the same place. And so even in the 6th chapter, even if you are starting in that place, that higher place, it's relative because you still have to go to the highest place, which is the bhajate yomam samyukta tamomataha. And so, in many ways, Arjuna asking the same questions over and over again. Sometimes you're like, why do you have that illusion still? Krishna's already told you. Allows Krishna to evolve these concepts and bring everything that you could possibly imagine from the old Veda and the Upanishad into a discussion. You know what I mean? You get the whole thing. You get the whole thing. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So therefore, 13.1 as a clarifier, sure, why not? And why would Arjuna ask it? Because he wants to know every last thing you could possibly think of and like have it all be brought together. He's doing the same thing you're doing when you're trying to figure out a way to join Sharanagata and Mameva Ye Prapadyante, right? And so he's trying to...
Prapatti and Prapadyante are similar.
Yes. Yes.
So that is not necessarily Ramanuja Sampradaya concept. No? That is like
what? Prapadyante?
Prapatti.
No. I'm not saying Prapatti.
Yeah, Prapatti.
I'm not saying that that's Ramanuja's concept. I'm saying the idea of Sharanagati comprised of 6 elements. Yeah. That's from Ramanuja. Borrowed by Gopal Bhatta Goswami.
And then continued.
So here, where you're looking at Mameva ye prapadyante ma'ametam taranti te, that by surrendering me you can overcome Maya.
And the symptom of surrender is that you should accept the things and favorable, reject the things unfavorable. So like I'm in a loop.
No. I got you. Not like that. Not like that. Take the word symptom and switch it out for practice. The practice of surrender is to accept things favorable and reject things unfavorable. You follow?
Yeah.
You understand the point?
Yeah. But still, same confusion remains. Even
No, it doesn't remain. Because they both become a sadhana. By the sadhana of prapadyante. Pad means step. Okay? And so prapadyante literally means to step towards. They step towards me. Okay? That's what it literally means. However, prapadyante, in language oftentimes, the word pad is very similar to the word pat. And so it's almost like has developed the same meaning. So prapadyante means to step towards the Lord, but it also means to fall down before the Lord. You follow? This happens in languages where words which sound alike oftentimes end up having similar meanings. And so mameva ye prapadyante means that they surrender to me, they fall down before me, they come to me, right? Which is very similar to prapana, prapati, similar to prapati, right? And similar to sharanagati, right? Similar. They all carry very much the same idea. Okay. And these terms were first developed by the Ramanujis, and they were borrowed by us as we were developing our own tradition. Now there are 6 symptoms of surrender. Great. Now you can recognize your guru, because you can see the person who's following these 6 symptoms. There are 6 symptoms of surrender. Now you can check yourself. There are 6 symptoms of surrender. Now you know what to practice. Bhaktivinoda, when he explores Sharanagati, he gives 1 bhajan in this world. Right? I will accept those things which are favorable for my bhajan. Then he gives 1 for that world. I will only accept the remnants of Lalita Devi receives through Rupa Banjari. He gives 1 accepting favorable things for this world, for a sadhaka vesh, and he gives 1 for accepting things in that world, a siddha vesh. He goes through all the prayers of Sharanagati like that. 4 or 5 bhajans for each symptom, and you watch. Several of them are for this world, you can relate to them, and several of them are for that world. You offer your prayers to them. You follow? So you can use this in sadhana, you can use it in sadhya. You can use it to check yourself, you can use it to check your guru jana. You can use it for pariksha, but you can also use it for your own practice, because what does surrender mean? You follow? So now, first thing I always say, don't take 2 different systems and try to merge them together artificially. Sharanagati is its own system. And this, verse from the Gita is its own system. Don't artificially feel like you have to force them together. Let them breathe on their own. However, if you want to see them together, that's okay. But don't feel disturbed in your mind if they don't go together. Just like I gave the example. Who do you have more in common with? From a point of view of being Deshi, you have more in common with them. From language, from similar upbringing, from cultural reference, from the sports that you like, right? You have more in common with them. In terms of time in the movement, you have more in common with me, right? And so in terms of Shastra Gyan, you have more in common with me. So we can divide the room up 10 different ways. By age, who has hair, who doesn't have hair, who's wearing a dhoti, who's not wearing a dhoti, right? Who speaks a language, who doesn't speak that language. And each one of them is going to yield benefit. And you don't have to necessarily collapse them all together. You can just say, looking at it from this angle, this is the way it works. Looking at it from this angle, this is the way it works. Right? You follow? That makes sense, right? So you don't, it's a big problem people have, is they think there's like only one system. And so they try to merge everything together and they get all confused when they can't do it. Don't do like that. Don't do that. Let each system, understand each system on its own. Then when you become Shastra Yukti Nipuna, right? Then you can join them all together. But in the beginning, let's just focus on understanding them in their own way. But if you did want to merge these together, they're both sadhana. These 6 symptoms of surrender are how you become surrendered. You follow? You follow? And this prapadyante is how you cross over Maya. And so the same thing works for both, from a point of view of sadhana. And that dissolves the question. You're seeing them as symptoms, meaning for sadhya, right? But look at the 6 symptoms of how I will then surrender. And now it becomes a sadhana and it merges perfectly with the Gita, isn't it?
I was referring to them as sadhana only, not as sadhya. Sadhana only. 6 symptoms are sadhana.
Yes?
Sadhana is sadhana.
So then what's the problem?
So as a sadhaka, I have to practice there. I have to practice accepting favorable, rejecting unfavorable. So that means I'm still in Maya actually. I'm struggling with Maya. And solution to struggling with Maya is to practice that.
Oh, no. No. I got you. I understand now. No, very simple. By surrendering to Krishna, that does not happen in 1 second.
Yeah.
So now prapajante, what does that mean, prapajante? I don't know what it means. Oh, hey, look, here's a list of 6 symptoms of Sharanagati, right? So I want to become Sharanagata, right?
Yeah.
You follow? Here's 6 symptoms. I didn't know what to do. Krishna was saying in the Gita, they surrendered to me. I didn't know what that meant. I was confused about what that meant. Now, when it says here are 6 ways to do that, now I can start to practice it. Now, when Krishna says surrender to me, it's not that we're like, who is it? It's Maharaj Kukudmi, who surrenders in 1 second?
Khatvanga Maharaj.
Khatvanga Maharaj, right? That's right, Khatvanga Maharaj. Kukudmi is the one who didn't surrender in a second. It took him 10 million years with Revati. That's right. So Khatvanga Maharaj, right? Surrenders in 1 second. Not like that. Prapadyante means you step towards Krishna. 1 step towards him, he makes 10 towards you. It may take a long time, many lifetimes, to cross over Maya. But it's a practice. In other words, how do I cross over Maya? By prapad, right? By surrendering to Krishna, right? And so that doesn't mean it happens in 1 second. So I have to practice that. You follow? I have to practice that for a long period of time. Just like I have to practice Sharanagati for a long period of time. Sharanagati then becomes a tika on this verse because it gives you 6 things to do instead of 1 thing to do. It gives you some way to look. Just like when Krishna says, Mahatmanas tumam parta daivim prakritim ashrita, right? And he says, Satatam kirtayanto mam. Those Mahatmas are daivim prakritim ashrita, right? But what do? Satatam kirtayanto mam. He tells you what they do, and he gives you some information, right? Similarly here, Sharanagati is a beautiful tika to this verse because it tells you how to actually surrender. The problem you have is you think that prapajante happens in 1 second, but it doesn't. It happens over many lifetimes. Right? Bahunam jamanamante Yanavamam prapajante. Even in that same chapter, Krishna makes this point that it happens over many lifetimes, right? You see the point? Right? And so now it's a sadhana that doesn't happen all at once. Happens over a long time, and now you've gotten rid of your problem. Because your problem was that one happened immediately, but I'm still in Maya, so what do? Like the Maharaj who asked Ashtavakra Muni, I hear the holy name purifies you, but I'm still contaminated. And he goes and grabs the pillar and says, free me. And the king thinks he's crazy. You have to learn to let go. So bahunam jamanamante, right? And even that jnani, right? That eka bhakti jnani, that verse comes afterwards. Even he has to live many lifetimes. So this prapajante that's foreshadowed. It's foreshadowed. You know what that means, foreshadowed? It means it's spoken of in a little bit and it's given more detail later on. So he hints at it here. Then he gives more detail. So this prapajante is hinted at right there. But then more detail later on in the same chapter. And then it's clearly indicated to be a sadhana because many lifetimes go by. And now it merges perfectly with Sharanagati. Right? Saraswati Puja, I don't know. I'm not a Hindu. You know more than me. You were born a Hindu. I don't know what it is.
It's not a Hindu. It's like a Vaishnav calendar festival.
Yeah, I don't know how it worked its way in there, man. It doesn't make any sense to me either, you know? Sometimes like we put, some holidays which are not so dear to us. Maybe Ganesh Chaturthi makes it into a Vaishnav calendar. So, Saraswati Puja, I don't think the Vaishnavs celebrate it. Yeah. I don't know what it is. I'm assuming it's like a Lakshmi Puja type thing. I'm assuming it's like the Lakshmi Puja which is done during Diwali, right? And somehow it like slipped in there with Vasant Panchami. It kind of slipped in there, right? Something like that, right? I don't know why it made it in the BBT calendar. 13.1 we did. What is the need to speak 433 when it can further confuse?
The end part is important. Like Krishna probably sometimes tries to himself make the Gita confusing. You see,
Matstani Sarvabhutani, Naksha Matstani Sarvabhutani, Pashyame Yogam Aishwaram. All beings are in me, they're not in me, behold my opulence, right? He does that, isn't it?
That is like a different thing, but this is like a clearly
Let me see it.
Confusing.
Let me see it. Shreya Dravya Mayad Yagyat. Jnana Yagya Parantapa. I got it. So the Dravya, the Jnana Yagya is better than the Dravya Yagya, right? It's better than, right? Yeah. So the thing is, in this 4th chapter, in this 4th chapter, what you get is you get this idea that it's not so much what you do, it's why you do it. It's a very important point. It evolves the concept. Think about it for a second. First of all, we have Sankhya. You're not your body. What do? Go do your duty, but don't be attached. Now we talk about yoga, right? And that yoga is sometimes given the adjectival modifier, Buddhi yoga. Buddhi because you're enlightened. Enlightened by what? By the Sankhya I just spoke. So Buddhi is synonymous with Sankhya in that yoga. So I teach you you're not the body. Then I tell you to go out in the world and live your life, knowing that you're not the body, but doing your duty, but without the attachment. You follow? Then I tell you, actually, do some yajna. Give something back. Don't just be detached. Do some yajna. Give something back. Now I tell you, it's not just that you do that yajna, it's your consciousness while you're doing that yajna. You follow? That ingredient of it's not just what you do, but it's why you do it. You follow? Like I may give some charity, just so I get a big name as like that I'm very, very generous. But if I give some charity just to sincerely help somebody, that's better. Finally, if I give some charity as my seva to Krishna, then that's even better. And so it's not just what you do, it's why you do it. This is a very beautiful point that's made in this chapter. Because Krishna actually explains, he surveys the Vedic landscape. You can do pranayama, you can do yoga, you can do tapasya, you can do yajna, you can be a brahmachari, you can be a grihastha, just in the beginning here. I'll survey the whole landscape of all the sadhanas people are doing. But the most important thing is why they're doing it. You follow? That's what actually makes the magic. And so he's kind of summing up what he's taught in this chapter. It's not just what you do, it's why you do it. And then sarva karma akilam partha jnani parisama apyate. So then everything is accomplished by one who's attained to this platform of jnana, right? That's what he's saying?
All works ultimately culminate in transcendental knowledge.
Yeah. Good. And so the point is, here you're doing the same yajna, you're doing the same karma, but he's really stressing here why you should do it. And that's why the chapter can be legitimately titled Jnana Yoga. He's not teaching jnana as some kind of practice. He's teaching the same practice that he's been teaching all along. The chapter is filled with different types of karma that you can do, isn't it?
But at the end of all that, he says ultimately it all leads to jnana. Basically, jnana is higher than all that.
Yeah.
Ultimately, all leads to jnana. So, okay, so why not directly do jnana then? Then in the 5th chapter, Arjuna asks again, he gets confused because of this, I think. Because of this thing in 4th chapter, again 5th chapter, is that confusion is there.
I always thought that the reason why he was confused was because he said, I think maybe one of the Tikakars mentions this, yoga sanyasta karma nam jnana sanchina samshayam. That 41st text is given as the specific reason. But still, I appreciate your point, yes. So text 41, right? So it's not, maybe you're thinking it culminates and that's all there is, right? But he's like confused because it's like, you got to do yoga, you got to do karma, you got to do jnana, it's all mixed together, right? And so he's not exactly sure what's going on there. And then he says you get up and fight, and like really confused them then, right? Yeah. He's telling them sannyasa, he's telling them to fight, and then that sannyasa is what comes up in the 5th chapter. But that's actually true. We do things. Prabhupada said one time, if you make Krishna smile by your action, your life is perfect. So as a bhakta, we'll go back in this Gita, right? Like we'll say, for instance, what is night for all living beings is daytime for the Muni, right? We'll take that and we'll say, yeah. Just like in everybody thinks it's all about sambhog, some nitya nikunja vilas with Krishna. They don't realize that when you really miss Krishna, when you really love Krishna, when you really feel separated from Krishna, that actually there's a sweetness and ananda in there. That without that, what would it be? Vina vipralamba, right? Sambhog mau ashnute from Ujjvala Nilamani, or as Gaur Govinda Maharaj used to say, without separation, love would die an untimely death. They don't understand that in that pain, in that separation, that there's some beauty, some sweetness there. So we'll read that verse from the 2nd chapter of the Gita, and we think that. You follow? You understand? So when we read about the jnana, we read about, it's really like, are you doing Shuddha Bhakti? What's your reason for doing your bhakti? Are you trying to become a famous pandit? Are you trying to acquire some labh, puja, and pratishta? Or is your only desire to help people come closer to Krishna? You follow? For us, that's the gyan. That's better than just going through the motions. It's why you're doing it. Bhakti becomes an internal cultivation as much as it's an external cultivation. You follow? So for us, we can read it like that. You understand? And then for the beginner, then it's like, yeah, it's not just what you do. It's not just getting the yajna perfect. It's not just getting everything dialed in perfectly. It's actually why you do it. There's no such thing as a perfect yajna. You follow? Get rid of that materialism, like the Mimamsakas. And that is a higher concept. And therefore there is an evolution of the yajna in the 4th chapter, and there is a value in that verse. The fact that it opens the door to some potential misunderstanding, and now you have to do your work a little harder so people can't like bring this verse out to you and make you think that this is gyan, that's just your work. That's your job. You follow? That's your job. You know? You can go through the chapter and you can find, it's like... Gyan here is not a final point. Nahi gyanena sadrisham pavitram. There's nothing as pure as gyan. Iha vidyate. Tat swayam yoga samsiddha kalena atmani vindati. It's very beautiful. Atmani vindati. He finds happiness in himself. That indicates the soul is pure. You follow? You follow? You might wonder, like, where's the idea that the soul is ultimately pure come from? It's right here in the Gita. Kalena atmani vindati. He finds that yoga samsiddhi in himself. Right? Atmani evatmana tushtaha. He finds happiness in the self by the self. You follow? That indicates that the soul is pure. So here, that yoga samsiddhi is above the gyan. The gyan is a beautiful thing which leads you to that yoga samsiddhi. But it's not that gyan by itself is the highest thing. And then you have to have faith. You have to have faith. Now the faith comes up. You follow? And that faith, tunum bhakta shradaya archita michasi. Now that faith immediately gets linked to bhakti. Later on in the text. So now the idea of having faith. And the gyan is a vehicle that gets you to a yoga samsiddhi. And then what does that yoga samsiddhi consist of? You follow? And then, gyanam labdva param shantim achirena adigachti. You go to a higher place of peace. What does that higher place look like? Right? Well, tat dham paramam mama, right? That place becomes my place, right? You follow? And so, I think that you can easily escape a finality of gyan being above bhakti. Your problem is you meet some people, they're Hindus, they read this verse, it seems to postulate jnana as being above karma, and now jnana means Shankar, jnana means Mayavad, jnana means Brahman, impersonalism, this and that, right? But the thing is, Brahman for Krishna never means an impersonal Brahman. I mean, for the most part, Brahman is like a spiritual state of being. Brahman is also Krishna. Brahman is also Veda. Brahman is also the material world, Mahat Brahma, right? The closest thing you get to Brahman being impersonal is in the 12th chapter, when it's defined as Achalam, Kutastha, this and that, right? But then you get the most beautiful defeat of Mayavad philosophy that's ever been given anywhere in any shastra. Dvavimau Purushau Loke. I've told you this before. There are 2 Purushas in this world. Kshara, Akshara, Evacha. The Kshara Purusha and the Akshara Purusha. Kshara, Sarvani, Bhutani. All the people in this world are fallen. Kutastha, Akshara, Uchate. One who is Kutastha is Akshar. Shankar tries to explain that means like, Kut means a trick. But like it doesn't work because Kutastha is used elsewhere in the Gita and it always means situated at the pinnacle. It's used in the description of Brahman as Kutastha, Achalam, Dhruvam, right? Anirdesh, right? So you cannot artificially, separate from the entire text of the Gita, give that reading. It doesn't work at all. Then, Uttama Purusha tu Anya. The supreme person is different. Different than what? Than the liberated soul, who's Kutastha, and the conditioned soul. That means that even in the liberated state, you never become one with God. You follow? Paramatma iti udahrita. Therefore, he's known as Paramatma, a supreme soul. Yo lokatrayam avisha vibharti avyam ishwam. He's avyaya ishwar. He's always been the Lord. And if that wasn't clear enough, yasmat kshara atitoham, because I am beyond the kshara purush. Aksharat apichotama. I'm beyond the akshara purush. You follow? Yo lokatrayam. what is the Yo Loka? No, that's the previous verse. Yo Loke Vedecha Pratita Purushottama. I'm known in this world in the Vedas as Purushottama. So now, Krishna's just said, there are liberated and non-liberated beings. I'm neither one of them. I'm different than the liberated and non-liberated beings. I created this world. I'm maintaining it. I've always been the Lord. Because I am beyond the liberated and non-liberated beings, I'm therefore known as the Supreme Being. You follow? That defeats Mayavad philosophy for all time. And then, Yo mam evam asamudho janati purushottamam. If you know me as Purushottama, without any doubt, Sasarvavit, you know everything. Bhajati mam sarvabhavana, you worship me with your whole heart. The result of knowing Krishna as he's explaining himself is that you become a bhakta. And don't say it's a partial truth, because Sasarvavit, if you know this, you know everything. And then, oh, this is some lower understanding. Iti guhyattamam shastram. It's the highest understanding of Shastra. And the preface of that whole section, Vedescha sarvera hameva vedya. Prabhupada develops this argument in the light of the Bhagavat. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur develops this argument. So in terms of like being worried that Gyan is going to lead you, the thing is this, everybody's so diseased. As soon as you hear Brahman, you think Shankar is Brahman. But Krishna doesn't use the term Brahman like that in the Gita. So what's the problem? We have a lot in common with Krishna. We're eternal. Krishna's eternal. We're pure. Krishna's pure. Therefore, if there's some verse which starts to talk about the oneness of God and the soul, that's fine. There's no problem with that. The only problem we have is if it's a oneness without any room for difference. You follow? But actually, we have so much in common with Krishna. So one of the problems we get into sometimes is we feel like any time there's anything which sounds Gyan or sounds Brahman or sounds like it creates a oneness between us and God, that we have to run from it like Madhva and just like hate it and just like give a completely alternate explanation. Actually, we don't have to. Run with it. Run with it. Like in the 13th chapter of the Gita, those verses, right? Take Shankar's interpretation of all of them. You still come up with you become a bhakta. You still come up with Brahmanohi pratishtaham. You still come up with Brahma Bhuya Kapate, which leads you to Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. You follow? You still get there. You can't twist anything like Mayavad out of it. You see the point? So we have to stop worrying if we encounter the word Gyan. There are words. You follow? There are words.
One devotee was saying this, Brahman is not monopoly of Mayavadis.
That's right. It's our Brahman. We like Brahman. You follow? We are Vedantins. Yeah. We are Bhakti Vedantins. That's our tradition. See how Krishna uses Brahman, Gyan, Karma, Yoga, and the Gita. He doesn't use these terms to distinguish like Vivekananda did. Even like the Bhagavat does. He doesn't do that. They're all harmoniously merged together under Bhakti. You see? There's no danger. Like when Krishna in the 8th chapter of the Gita, he says, Prayana kale, manas achalena, your mind's undeviating. Bhaktya yukto, you're linked to me through bhakti. Yoga balena, by the strength of yoga. Pruvor madhye pranama vesha, you locate your prana between your eyebrows. Sattam param purusham upaiti divyam. And then you attain the divya param purusha, right? Yad aksharam veda vit vadanti. Now the knowers of the Vedas, they're chanting akshar, vishanti. Chayatayo vitaraga, they're freed from, these yatis are freed from passion. Ya ichanto brahmacharyam charanti. And they're following brahmacharya. Tatpe padam sangrahena. What is it? I can't read it because there's Pravakshay. And so now they're talking about the supreme abode. And then Sarvadvarani Samyamya, they're closing all the gates of the body. Manohridi Nirudhyacha, they're winding down the mind and situating it in the heart. Mudni Adhyatma Pranam, they're situating in the prana in the head. Asito Yoga Dharanam. Om Iti Aksharam Brahma. Vyaharan mam anusmar. Now they remember me while chanting akshar or om. And then yaprayati tyajam jayam, they give up their body. Sayati paramam gatim, they go to the supreme abode. Right? What's the problem with all that? It says that they have to remember me. It says that they have to practice bhakti. Right? And so you can reach around your head and touch your nose. Right? Or Ananyas cheta satatam yo mam smarti nityasa tasyaham sulabha parta. I'm easy to achieve. This is durlabh. This is durlabh. and now sulabh. He's contrasting it, right? It's very easy for me to be achieved, right? So you can reach around your head 4 times and touch your nose, which is what it's doing here, because you still need bhakti, and you still need to remember Krishna, or you can just remember Krishna from the beginning, and that's enough by itself. And so what happens is every time there's something which seems like it might be teaching something different, Krishna brings it right back to bhakti every single time. So we don't have to worry about being, that 33rd verse of the 4th chapter makes things difficult. It's sweet. It flows together. It teaches something important. Just don't let people make it into Shankar's Tika. You have to call them on it. Where does that say that's an impersonal Brahman that's being described? Where does that say that's Gyan as like an impersonal tradition, as studying Vedanta and not doing your duty and taking sannyas? Where is that being described? I don't see that being described. I see Jnana, the principle that's why you do the yajna, not what particular yajna you do. That's all I see Krishna saying. You follow? What people do is they try and slip that past you. They say, if you say God has a form, you're limiting God. If you say God has a form, you're limiting God. Why? That's because you assume that form means material form. That form means limitation. You follow? You don't say that. You don't say form means material form. Therefore, if you say God has a form, you're limiting God. Nobody says that. Do you understand? They assume it. They don't tell you. Let me say it again. They just say, you say God has a form, you're limiting God. But that's actually a logical argument. Form is limiting, God has a form, therefore God is limited. It's a logical syllogism. You follow? You follow? Form is limiting. It's a major premise. God has a form. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. You follow? It's a mathematical proof. All men are mortal. So you have all men are mortal. Then you have another point. Socrates is a man. Men and man, those two terms cross each other out like in algebra. Now you have Socrates is mortal. You see that? There's a common term between those two. It gets nullified, and then you merge those other two terms, and they're linked together. Socrates is mortal. You follow? So all form is limiting. God has a form. Therefore, God is limited. It's the same point. But they won't say all form is limiting. They just say you say God has a form, therefore you're limiting God. So your job as a pundit, as a preacher, is to figure out what they're assuming, which is messing everything up. You go, why do you think all form is limiting? Your form is limited. Why can't there be a spiritual form? You follow? If you say God doesn't have a form, you're also limiting God, because you're saying there's something God doesn't have. And if you think if God had a form, God's form would be like you, now you're what's called an anthropomorphist. You just think God is like you. We don't have that disease. We understand that God is beyond us, and therefore if God has a form, it's a spiritual form, which is the origin of your form, because God is the origin of everything. And if you have a form, it must have come from somewhere, and therefore the ultimate source of all forms is God. You see? So don't get freaked out by this jnana thing. Run with it.
I think this is the Mayavadi within me. Nobody else asked me this. This is like my own.
You think. As soon as you see jnana, it's like a cow seeing red.
Jnana section seems to end over at 32. 32 is like a very nice verse to end this all jnana.
Very nice.
Jnana. After suddenly Krishna puts this.
Yes.
So this is like intentionally making the.
It's the theoretical jnani in you that is doing battle before you give class. You're thinking of all the possible objections you could hear. And so you're doing, and so
not even for class, just for my own personal reading.
Yeah, so don't worry about it, man. Jnana is bhakti. Jnana is bhakti in the Gita. That's why that verse about the jnani, he's a bhakta. Krishna doesn't have a problem. He just says, right? Jnani eka bhakti vishishate, right? He says that jnani with one point of bhakti is dear to me, is like the best, right? He has no problem with merging jnana and bhakti. No problem. Jnana and bhakti, no problem at all.